It's Erick Erickson here. The Erick Erickson Show. I got to get caffeinated this morning. We got all the kids home from school now. Welcome. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425, across our gorgeous state of Georgia. By the way, a quick programming note. After the first of the year, I'm going to step away. I'll come back on Christmas Eve. I don't want to have a guest host work on Christmas Eve. I'll do the work. And for Christmas, and I'll do a Christmas show on Christmas Eve and Christmas, and then I'll come back on the 2nd. And we're going to gear up for the state legislative session. Because we're a Georgia show, we can do this. We cover the whole state. We'll have the governor. We're lining up an interview with new Senator Kelly Loeffler, Jeff Duncan. We'll get a play-by-play on what's going to happen in the state legislature. Right now, though, as we start the day here, this cold Friday, things are going to warm up significantly, but up in North Georgia, it is chilly. It is below freezing in most of North Georgia right now. 32 in Jasper and down. When you get up north, it's below freezing in Athens, 36 in Atlanta. You get to the south of us in Vidalia, it's 37. Valdosta's 45. Eastman's 36. Right here in Macon, it is 36 degrees, and we're only going to get up into the mid-50s. But then we're going to get some gross weather. I mean, it's supposed to be in the 70s in Macon on Christmas Eve. I'm disappointed by that, but that's okay. Now, I was going to start with, we will get to the Democrats' debate last night. You probably do not even know that the Democrats debated last night, and the most contentious part of the debate was over a wine cave. I didn't know there was such a thing as a wine cave, but apparently there is. Some billionaire in Silicon Valley had Pete Buttigieg in for a wine cave. He's got some. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. But we need to go to impeachment first. Before we go to impeachment, though, I got to completely disrupt my show and the order of things that I intended to do because my buddy Kenny, who lives down in Macon, sent me an article from the London Spectator I had missed. And it's worth beginning this show this way as we come towards the end of the year. This is from Matt Ridley from The Spectator. Let nobody tell you the second decade of the 21st century has been a bad time. We're living through the greatest improvement in human living standards in history. Extreme poverty has fallen below 10% of the world's population for the first time. It was 60% when I was born. Global inequality has been plunging as Africa and Asia experience faster economic growth than Europe and North America. Child mortality has fallen to record lows. Famine virtually went extinct. Malaria, polio, and heart disease are all in decline. Little of this made news because good news is no news, but I've been watching it all closely. Ever since I wrote The Rational Optimist in 2010, I've been faced with what about questions. What about the Great Recession, the Euro crisis, Syria, Ukraine, Donald Trump? How can I possibly say things are getting better given all that? The answer is because bad things happen while the world still gets better. Yet get better it does, and it does so over the course of this decade at a rate that astonished even starry-eyed me. Now, he goes on to point out some of the facts of this past year. Before we get there, I want to play some audio that I have held off on playing until we got a relevant moment, in large part because there hasn't been a moment to really talk about it with everything else going from impeachment to Horowitz to the rest of it. But someone put together a montage of Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg is the 16-year-old child with Asperger's that we're all supposed to listen to, and you can't criticize because she has a developmental disability, but we're supposed to listen to her and disrupt Western economies because of her. I want to play you this montage of Greta Thunberg's rhetoric. She has now had to apologize for saying that we should put politicians up against a wall who do not go along with her agenda. She subsequently apologized for it. Here's Thunberg.
Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic.
We have been polluting the earth for years, and we might actually die in a few years.
Our world is already in flames. It's getting hotter. We can't breathe.
We are here because our parents trashed the planet,
and it's up to our generation to save it.
Unlike so many people my age, I feel really visceral anxiety about climate change.
Call us Generation Z, the last letter of the alphabet, because we are going to be the last generation to survive.
My conscience couldn't handle the idea of bringing someone into a dying world.
I'm angry because this planet is dying and the president of the biggest country in the world refuses to acknowledge that.
And I'm sick of the future that they put on us.
I am here for the people who are suffering and dying because of our country's decision.
People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing.
Our oceans are choking with trash, and the 6th mass extinction is well underway.
We do not have time to be polite. This is a revolution.
It doesn't matter how much we're taxed if we don't have an earth to live on.
We need to do more instead of having a corrupt president who won't acknowledge that the earth is literally dying.
This is environmental racism, and we must acknowledge the issue.
We need to listen to our children because they totally get it.
Because every day of inaction drives more action from us!
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet, I'm one of the lucky ones.
Beginning and ending with Greta Thunberg and then all the children she has inspired. Do you hear that rhetoric? That is not healthy for the mental well-being of these kids. Some of them really believe that we're on the verge of death. Some of them believe they can't have children because adding more people to this planet will destroy the planet. It's just absurd. I saw an article yesterday of some science writer who has gone on and sterilized himself with the help of a doctor. Thankfully, he didn't do it himself. He did have a doctor do it because he doesn't think we can have kids, that if he brings children on the planet, it would be harmful to them and harmful to the planet. This is just bizarre cultism. And it's in defiance of all the data. So again, if you're just joining me, it is Erick Erickson here, and I realize we got other more pressing things to talk about, but I put this off, and then my buddy Kenny sent me the story by Matt Ridley from The Spectator, and it's worth noting. Let me read you some of what's happened in the last decade as Greta Thunberg and her child cohort say the world is coming to an end and we're all going to die in the next decade. I thought we had 12 years left. They have robbed me of 2 years. Even in cases when the use of stuff is not falling, it is rising more slowly than expected. For instance, experts in the 1970s forecast how much water the world would consume in the year 2000. In fact, the total usage that year was half as much as predicted. Not because there were fewer humans, but because human inventiveness allowed more efficient irrigation for agriculture, the biggest use of water. Until recently, most economists assumed that these improvements were almost always in vain because of rebound effects. If you cut the cost of something, people would use more of it, make light less energy hungry, and people leave them on for longer. This is known as the Jevons paradox, after the 19th century economist William Stanley Jevons, who first described it. But Andrew McAfee argues that the Jevons paradox doesn't hold up. Suppose you switch from incandescent to LED bulbs in your house and save about 3/4 of your electric bill from lighting. You might leave lights on for longer, but surely not 4 times as long. Efficiencies in agriculture mean the world is now approaching peak farmland. Despite the growing number of people and their demand for more and better food, the productivity of agriculture is increasing so fast that human needs can be supplied by a shrinking amount of land. In 2012, Jesse Asobel from Rockefeller University and his colleagues argued that thanks to modern technology, we use 65% less land to produce a given quantity of food compared with 50 years ago. By 2050, it's estimated that an area the size of India will have been released from the plow and the cow. Land sparing is the reason that forests are expanding, particularly in rich countries. In 2006, Asobel worked out that no reasonably wealthy country had a falling stock of forest in terms of both tree density and acreage. Large animals are returning in abundance in rich countries. Populations of wolves, deer, beaver, lynx, seals, sea eagles, and bald eagles are all increasing, and now even tiger numbers are slowly climbing. Now, this is about Britain here. Perhaps the most surprising statistic is that in Britain, they're using steadily less energy. John Constable of the Global Warming Policy Forum points out that although the UK's economy has almost trebled in size since 1970 and the population is up 20%, total primary inland energy consumption has fallen 10%. Much of that decline happened in the last decade. This is not necessarily good news, although the improving energy efficiency of light bulbs, airplanes, and cars is part of the story. It also means we're importing more embedded energy and products, having driven much of our steel, aluminum, and chemical industries abroad. Since its inception, the environmental movement has been obsessed with finite resources. The two books that kicked off the green industry in the early 1970s, The Limits of Growth in America and Blueprint for Survival in Britain, both lamented the imminent exhaustion of metals, minerals, and fuels. The Limits to Growth predicted that if growth continued, the world would run out of gold, mercury, silver, tin, zinc, copper, and lead well before 2000. School textbooks echoed the claims. This caused the economist Julian Simon to challenge the ecologist Paul Ehrlich to a bet that a basket of 5 metals chosen by Ehrlich would cost less in 1990 than in 1980. The Stone Age did not end for lack of stone, Simon said, arguing we would find substitutes if metals grew scarce. Simon won the bet easily, although Ehrlich wrote the check with reluctance, sniping that the one thing we'll never run out of is imbeciles. To this day, none of those metals has significantly risen in price or fallen in volume of reserves, let alone run out. As we enter the third decade of the 21st century, I'll make a prediction. By the end of it, we'll see less poverty, less child mortality, less land devoted to agriculture in the world. There will be more tigers, whales, forests, and natural reserves. British and Americans will be richer. Each of us will use fewer resources. The global political future may be uncertain, but the environmental and technological trends are pretty clear and pointing in the right direction. Barring a war, I would add, barring a war. There are some people who think something wicked this way comes, and that would disrupt it. But seriously, there are people out there who are stressed out and at wits' ends that the end of the world is imminent, that we have a decade or less. You have people freaking out about global warming and climate change as we head out of this decade into the next decade of the 21st century. They really do believe that by the end of the next decade, people are going to be dying because of environmental disaster and the rise of seas and the melting of the ice caps and the rise of disease and plague and everything else. And by any metric you measure, the world is actually doing fairly well. Turns out that this planet is fairly resilient, as are we. We're also highly innovative. I get people mad at me all the time these days because I say, you know what, I do believe if all of us on the planet and everything on the planet is in a symbiotic relationship together, then yes, our use of energy can affect the environment. And yes, so therefore I do think that we probably are warming the climate. There is a role to play. How much is probably overstated. But yeah, I think we're in a symbiotic relationship on this planet, and yes, we can affect the environment of the planet. That being said, I don't care. And that makes people mad. And I don't care because I believe in the resilience and innovation of mankind. I believe we are highly adaptable creatures, and I believe we'll get through it just fine. I think that the media gets into these moral outrages like vaping. Vaping has been a moral outrage of late. If you vape, you're going to die. You're just going to keel over dead if you vape. But the same with global warming and climate change and the environment. We're all going to die. Do you know there's actually no science that shows that hurricanes have increased because of global warming? There's actually no science that shows that wildfires in California that have gotten an overabundance of coverage are linked to global warming. In fact, they're a natural cyclical event in California and have been for hundreds and hundreds of years as best we can document. But people want to panic about something, and the latest panic of the age is the environment, and we're polluting the earth. This goes back to the 1970s, and I don't think there is a coincidence that many of the political squabbles that we have around the world today are the same squabbles we had at the end of the 1960s, the rise of progressivism and political agitation and political correctness and the like, much like we had in the end of the 1960s, beginning of the 70s. And we see the very same environmental, industrial grievances playing out the same way as well around the world. History's just repeating itself, but we'll all be fine. We'll all be fine. We can stop the collective freakout. And when we come back, we can laugh about impeachment. Did you know, according to the very witness that the Democrats in the House of Representatives brought forward to testify to the Judiciary Committee about impeachment, the Harvard constitutional law professor, he says President Trump hasn't actually been impeached. I'll explain.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson, the information you need and the truth you demand.
Well, he tells it like it is.
I know this is going to come as news to some of you, but turns out the president hasn't actually been impeached. This is from Noah Feldman at Bloomberg. Now that the House of Representatives has voted to impeach President Donald Trump, what is the constitutional status of the two articles of impeachment? Must they be transmitted to the Senate to trigger trial, or could they be held back by the House until the Senate decides what the trial will look like, as Speaker Nancy Pelosi has hinted? The Constitution doesn't say how fast the articles must go to the Senate. Some modest delay is not inconsistent, or how both chambers usually work. But an indefinite delay would pose a serious problem. Impeachment, as contemplated by the Constitution, does not consist merely of the vote by the House, but of the process of sending the articles to the Senate for trial. Both parts are necessary to make an impeachment under the Constitution. The House must actually send the articles and send managers to the Senate to prosecute the impeachment, and the Senate must hold a trial. If the House does not communicate its impeachment to the Senate, it hasn't actually impeached the president. If the articles are not transmitted, Trump can legitimately say he wasn't impeached at all. That's because impeachment under the Constitution means the House sending its approved articles to the Senate with House managers standing up in the Senate and saying the president is impeached. As for the headlines we saw after the House vote saying Trump impeached, those are media shorthand, not a technically correct legal statement. So far, the House has voted to impeach Trump. He isn't impeached until the articles go to the Senate and the House members deliver the message. So the House Democrats impeached the president in the name of preventing a constitutional crisis and have created a constitutional crisis of their own. For the House to vote to impeach without ever sending the articles of impeachment to the Senate for trial would deviate from constitutional protocol. It would mean that the president has not genuinely been impeached under the Constitution, and it would deny the president the chance to defend himself in the Senate that the Constitution provides. The relevant constitutional provisions are brief. Article 1 gives the House the sole power of impeachment, and it gives the Senate the sole power to try all impeachments. Article 2 says the president shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Putting these three different provisions together yields the conclusion that the only way to remove the president while he's in office is if the House impeaches him and the Senate tries and convicts him. The provisions say nothing about timing. Taken literally, they don't directly say the articles of impeachment passed by the House must be sent to the Senate. But the framers' definition of impeachment assumed that impeachment was a process, not just a House vote. The framers drafted the constitutional provisions against the backdrop of impeachment, as it had been practiced in England, where the House of Commons impeached and the House of Lords tried the impeachments. The whole point of impeachment by the Commons was for the charges of impeachment to be brought against the accused in the House of Lords. Strictly speaking, impeachment occurred and occurs when the articles of impeachment are presented to the Senate for trial. At that point, the Senate is obligated by the Constitution to hold a trial. What would make that trial fair is a separate question, one that deserves its own discussion. But we can say with some confidence that only the Senate is empowered to judge the fairness of its own trial. That's what the sole power to trial impeachment means. If the House votes to impeach but doesn't send the articles to the Senate or send impeachment managers there to carry its message, it hasn't directly violated the text of the Constitution. But the House would be acting against the implicit logic of the constitutional description of impeachment. A president who has been genuinely impeached must constitutionally have the opportunity to defend himself before the Senate. That's built into the constitutional logic of impeachment. To be sure, if the House just never sends its articles to the Senate, there can be no trial. But if the House never sends its articles, then Trump can say he's never actually been impeached. And that's not the message congressional Democrats were hoping to send.
30.
By the way, the constitutional scholars that went before the House Judiciary Committee agree the House has to send the articles over to the Senate for the Senate to be notified for there to be an impeachment.
15.
This whole thing is so ridiculous. Man, President Trump really is going to be president for life, isn't he?
877-973-7425.
Well, this is fun. CNN has just released a poll to get us started over the weekend. The poll was conducted the 12th through the 15th. So let me get on my account. Yeah. So a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. Yeah. I don't like polls that are conducted over the weekend, but nonetheless, CNN's treating this as legitimate. We should too. Among registered voters, allow me to give you the choice for president. Joe Biden would get 44. Donald Trump would get, Joe Biden would get 49. Donald Trump would get 44. Bernie Sanders would get 49. Donald Trump would get 45. Warren would get 47. Donald Trump would get 46. Buttigieg would get 45. Trump would get 46. So Trump would beat Buttigieg by a point. I mean, they're all within the margin of error, though. But now wait. You're saying to yourself, but Eric, this is a nationwide poll. It gets the people in California and New York as well. Yes, it does. So CNN also did battleground polling of registered voters. Choice for president. Now, what is a battleground state? According to CNN, it is the 15 states that were decided by 8 points or less in 2016. Biden 47, Trump 47. Warren 46, Trump 48. Sanders 45, Trump 49. Buttigieg 43, Trump 48. All within the margin of error. Less reliable in polling sample. But notable that only Biden and Trump are tied. And here's the thing. Why I said registered voters. Let me explain this to those of you who are new to the show or those of you who just forgot. Registered voting skews to the Democrats. You got to go to likely voters. Give the president 2 points. Give the president 2 more points in a poll of likely voters. So Biden right now 47-47. Trump Biden in the battleground states among registered voters. Trump's at 49 among likely voters. That's really good. The Democrats are taking for granted that they'll be able to beat the president. And I don't know that they're going to. I don't know that. Listen to Michael Bloomberg, who was not in last night's debate. And we'll get to the debate. I got lots of audio from the debate. But I wanted to set the stage for all of this with the political news and everything else first and impeachment. Here's Bloomberg.
When you listen to the conversations, there's no question the president did something that was totally inappropriate. I think if you look at the makeup of the Senate, it is unlikely, very unlikely that he gets convicted. And what impact this has on his reelection, I worry about.
And Ted Cruz.
Well, listen, the Democrats are in a panic because in the last month, their case collapsed. I mean, rewind back to a month ago. A month ago, every Democrat was saying over and over and over again, bribery. Remember, that was their talking point, bribery, bribery, bribery. The reason was the Democratic Campaign Committee, they polled that, and their focus groups had told them, bribery's bad. The American people don't like bribery. And so in one day, every Democrat began saying bribery. Here's the problem. The facts, the actual evidence doesn't support bribery. As they heard the evidence, they couldn't prove bribery. And they've now backed away from bribery. They backed away. Remember quid pro quo? Yeah. That was their favorite phrase.
And then there was extortion.
That's disappeared. And they've now taken the position that they can impeach the president without alleging that he violated any criminal law whatsoever, without alleging he violated any federal law, literally not even alleging a speeding ticket. That is a remarkable position. It's an extreme position. You played a clip from the president a moment ago where he said he's the first president impeached without alleging a crime. He's exactly right. This has never happened in the history of the country. The prior impeachments, every one of them, the articles alleged a federal crime. This one doesn't. It is exceptionally weak, and it doesn't meet the constitutional standard for high crimes and misdemeanors. And that's why Pelosi knows when it goes to the Senate, there's going to be a fair trial in the Senate. But this is not going to succeed because the House hasn't proven its case.
He's not wrong. And the Democrats don't want to send it to the Senate now, and that's the problem. If you're just tuning in, it's Erick Erickson. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. And I forget his name now. The constitutional scholar who testified to the Judiciary Committee, there were 3 of them. This was the one from Harvard. He has confirmed, and other constitutional scholars are coming out and saying he's right, that until the House conveys the articles of impeachment to the Senate, the president has not actually been impeached. So you got a situation here where the Democrats claim they have impeached the president, but they haven't yet. They took the vote to impeach the president, but until they send articles of impeachment over to the Senate and announce the president's been impeached, they haven't impeached him. So it may play well with the Democratic base, but I got to imagine with the Democratic base, I mean, these are the people who were campaigning with the chant, impeach the blankety blanker. They want the show and the spectacle, but they don't actually want the impeachment. I mean, you've got the Washington Post out there saying, this is a stain on the presidency. This is a stain on the Trump legacy. It will be permanently etched into his legacy. Y'all, I distinctly remember William Jefferson Clinton standing up at the Democratic National Committee 2016 convention, bragging about his wife. They gave him a spectacle and a stage to talk about Hillary. Yeah, that was a real permanent stain. The stain on Monica Lewinsky's dress has lasted longer than the impeachment stain on Clinton. Yeah, I don't think. The whole thing is farcical. We'll get to I'm seeing a tweet from someone. We'll get to Christianity Today. We will get to the Christianity Today. But you got to listen to this audio. I believe this is from CNN. They went up to Pennsylvania, one of the swing states, and interviewed a Trump voter on whether or not they have been persuaded now that the president is the Antichrist.
In Blair County, Pennsylvania, the impeachment of Donald Trump isn't hurting the president.
No, I love him.
Supporters say it's helping.
I think what they're doing is completely wrong. And I will vote for him in the coming election.
I think it's going to help him get reelected, actually.
Voters here are predominantly white, working class, strong in their conservative beliefs.
What do you think this will do for Democrats?
I think just put a nail in her coffin.
Trump won more than 70% of the vote in this blue-collar county, about 2 hours east of Pittsburgh, significantly outperforming Mitt Romney in 2012.
To make America great again.
But the Republican county chair says, had I asked him a year ago if Trump could repeat his success in 2020, he would have said unlikely.
He will.
Now?
I think he'll turn out that percent and more.
He'll do as good as that, maybe even better?
Maybe even better.
How's that possible? 2 reasons. Trump voters we talk to here like the economy and loathe impeachment. They credit Trump with the former and blame Democrats for the latter.
And how would you say the economy here is in Altoona?
It's good. It's not people celebrating boom days, but it feels like the kind of long-term steady growth.
At Blair Image Elements, they make signs all of us see. But what critics see as clear evidence of presidential abuse of power, CEO Philip DeVoris sees as just the same old polarized Washington politics that moved him to vote for Trump in the first place.
If it did anything, it would make me want to support him more.
It's pretty much the same story down on the farm.
This location, there's about 1,500 cows being milked.
Milk from the Culp family dairy goes into Hershey chocolate and Land O'Lakes butter. Culp's business is improving, but his attitude toward impeachment is not. He doesn't follow it much.
No, I've worked too many hours to pay close attention.
The way Culp sees it, voters should elect more like Trump to Congress.
Is the impeachment process in any way going to change your outlook or support of this president in 2020?
No. It just makes me, I guess, more convinced that we need more outsiders in Washington.
Did more harm than good. The LA Times went somewhere to interview voters about impeachment. Do you know where the LA, can you guess it? Y'all can't guess. Y'all don't read the LA Times. I read the Los Angeles Times, so you don't have to. The Los Angeles Times went to a place some of you have probably been. I'll be going through there on Wednesday myself. Noonan, Georgia. That's right, Noonan. Brett Smith considers himself more politically attuned than the average Republican. But when the House took on the somber task of impeaching President Trump this week, the 25-year-old played a Conan O'Brien podcast on a cell phone as he worked his shift, washing dishes at a deli in the small town of Noonan, 40 miles southwest of Atlanta. I have to tell you, let's stop right there. Noonan is not a small town. Have you been to Noonan lately? It's got multiple interstate exits. It's got a Barnes and Noble. It is not a small town. Nonetheless, Brett Smith says, you know it's going to be party line stuff. I'll catch up when I get home. It was only the third time in history that a U.S. president was charged with high crimes and misdemeanors. But in this town in Georgia and in many rural and suburban counties that are the bedrock of Trump's base, the event barely registered. Even as the House voted and Trump fulminated, small town life here went on. Folks finished up work chores, dashed to the post office to send Christmas cards, and donned gaudy holiday sweaters. No doubt, as elsewhere in America, some residents were watching Fox at home or transfixed by their Facebook feeds. But on the ground here in Noonan, the day passed as any other. The intense attention to the televised vote and the mixture of disgust and despair as expressed by liberal-leaning voters in big cities and the coasts found no equivalent here. Most people seemed, if anything, to be avoiding the spectacle. Enthusiasm for the president seemed as strong as ever. Republicans make up the majority in this historic rural railroad town. It is not a town. That was once home to a thriving cotton industry and is now a fast-growing bedroom exurb of Atlanta. In 2016, about 69%, you can tell I live here, Coweta County residents voted for Trump and 27% voted for Hillary Clinton. Pause, freeze frame, hold that thought. Years ago, I ran a congressional campaign. And part of that campaign ran through Coweta County. And one of the first educations I got was, how do you say the county name? Because you look at it and you're like, Coweta, what? Coweta? No. It is pronounced Coweta. Say Coweta County, or they know you're a Yankee. Okay, now pick back up that thought. Impeachment was not entirely forgotten. Even if voters here were not following the political showdown closely, there was no small amount of frustration at the idea of impeachment. Now, here's the thing. You have, this is a reporter for the LA Times, but it actually lives in Georgia, as best I can tell, but goes to the Redneck Gourmet in Noonan. Of course you're going to go to the Redneck Gourmet Cafe so that you can convey this sense of hickdom to the people who are going to read the Los Angeles Times. Now, here's the thing. So Brett Smith considers himself a moderate Republican. He did not vote for Donald Trump in 2016, but he doesn't think impeachment is good. He thinks it's a mistake. He acknowledges he has not read the articles of impeachment passed by the House, but says he thought the call seemed pretty normal because he read the transcript. Who doesn't obstruct Congress, he scoffed as he finished up his shift at the Redneck Gourmet. So give me a break. It's like the kid who cried wolf, you know. We keep hearing, this is the big one, this is the big one. And then life goes on, and he's still there, and he still tweets, and it's fine, and they move on to the next bombshell. It's a bunch of hoo-ha, says Cynthia Schell, a hospice nurse who lives in the nearby town of Sonoya. Okay, Sonoya is a town. Noonan, it ain't a town. It has a Barnes & Noble. It's not a town. An independent voter, she voted for Trump in 2016. She plans to vote for him again. Some say Trump's actions were little different from those of other presidents, or there was little evidence Trump had committed an actual crime. Others suggested that if the House didn't like the way Trump balked at complying with a request, they should go to court. Oh, mercy. Y'all. Oh, and then they interviewed Jimmy Davenport. They want the people who live in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago to control the rest of the people in this country, says 82-year-old mail delivery man Jimmy Davenport, who strolled across the town's historic courthouse square past boutique stores selling everything from gingerbread popsicles and ballet slippers to shotguns and ammo. You got to love Noonan. They think Trump's going to win the next election, so they're got to get him out of office. Davenport said, if you try to undo the results of the election, you're not for democracy. That's the voice of the people speaking. Until he voted for Trump in 2016, Davenport was a loyal Democrat. He voted for Clinton, or he voted for Kennedy. He voted for Carter. He voted to reelect Obama. But then he thought President Obama broke his promises on Social Security and he couldn't abide Hillary Clinton. He voted for Bill, but he couldn't vote for Hillary. Oh, my goodness gracious, y'all. And you know, these are smart people. Oh, and look, there's William Davis. He's 23. He goes to Mercer in Macon, where I am. That's my alma mater. He goes to law school there. I went to law school. He says if you don't impeach, you set a precedent for later presidents, but he's worried the timing was poor. It'll only bolster Trump's support in 2020. If you were to sit here and ask 8 of 10 Trump supporters what's going on in D.C. today, they'll have no idea. He reads Apple News, so he's more informed. I'm not saying Noonan's undereducated. A lot of people just jump on the coattails of what other people are saying. They don't care to dig deep. Like me, I'm an informed, smart law student. The rest of these clowns in the town, they don't know what's going on. Well, at least they got the one stereotypical person that people in L.A. can relate to.
As both sides target Georgia for 2020, Erick gives you the news you need from a Georgia perspective.
Y'all, I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to dwell on this the whole time. It is Erick Erickson here across the state of Georgia, but I go through Noonan. Noonan is such a small town. The Los Angeles Times has the story that Noonan is a small town. Noonan is such a small town that it has a bypass around it. And on that bypass, let's see, there's a Tin Drum Asian Kitchen, an Olive Garden, a BJ's Wholesale Club. There's a J.C. Penney's. There's a Rooms to Go. There's a Taco Mac. I love Taco Mac. There's a Best Buy. There's an American Eagle Outfitters. There's a Dick's Sporting Goods. There's a K Jewelers. There's a Dillard's. There's a Barnes & Noble. They've got the Loft. Y'all, come on. Boggles the mind. Yeah, it's such a small town. It has a Buffalo Wild Wings. This is absurd to call it a small town. And this is for the folks back home. You know and I know it's for the folks back home in Los Angeles to get a sense that they just coincidentally go to the Redneck Gourmet. The Redneck Gourmet. And of course, the guy who wants to tell you that, the Hicks and Rubes in Noonan, they just go along to get along, and they're not really well educated. And I read Apple News. It's a Mercer Law student, of course. Davis, who said he didn't identify with any party, sighed as he looked out at locals crisscrossing the town square, festooned with red bows and green garland. If you were to sit here and ask 8 of 10 Trump supporters what's going on in D.C. today, they wouldn't have any idea. He tries to keep up with news on C-SPAN, Apple News, and newspapers such as the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. But he says he's worried too many Americans are getting information from biased news sources. I'm not saying Noonan's undereducated. A lot of people just jump on the coattails of what other people are saying. They don't care to dig deeper and form their own opinions. He pointed out his parents both had college degrees. It's not really a lack of education. It's a lack of knowing what's going on in politics. Wow. So who do they interview? Because, his parents have college degrees and he's in law school. He's not like the other people in Noonan. They interview Jody Cassio, a 59-year-old cardiovascular stenographer. Yep, he's completely uneducated, Oh, man. And then they go back to the Redneck Gourmet. This is, y'all, this is narrative building. They go to a Redneck Gourmet deli in small town America, and you would never even know that it's not actually small town America. I go through Noonan all the time. My in-laws live in Carrollton. I'm trying to get on the radio station in Carrollton. You go from Macon, typically we'll go up to exit 205 on 75, get off, go through Griffin, we go through Sonoya on Highway 16. You get to the Noonan bypass, you get to that little gas station on the other side of Sonoya, there at the four-way stop, you turn and you wind up getting to the Noonan bypass there by the Piedmont Hospital that they've expanded in Noonan. And you go up the Noonan bypass past the J.C. Penney's and the Barnes & Noble and the Best Buy. And traffic is terrible, but they do have a Culver's now. If y'all haven't found a Culver's, find a Culver's. It's fantastic. Noonan is not, it's got a small town feel to it. It certainly does downtown. The historic district is gorgeous. Go through 15. It. But this is ridiculous, jaded, biased piece from the Los Angeles Times about life in small town America when it's not a small town. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. Across the state of Georgia, I am being told reliably that Mark Meadows, the outgoing congressman from North Carolina, is going to replace Mick Mulvaney as White House chief. I don't see it in any news headlines, but I am reliably told that we should expect that this is going to happen. Very interesting. Welcome. It is Eric. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425, across the state of Georgia. And if you're just tuning in, I know some stations don't come on till now. I'm sorry. I'm still chuckling to myself about they went to Noonan because that was where the Klan rally was going to be. And they characterize Noonan as a small town. Noonan has a Dillard's, a Barnes & Noble, an AMC theater, a Best Buy. It's got multiple interstate stops. I-85 goes through there, and yet it is now. And certainly, it has a small downtown vibe in downtown Noonan. It very much has a small downtown vibe. But it's over 40,000 people. I grew up in a small town. I grew up in a small town where we had 2,000 people if you counted the mental patients at Louisiana State Hospital. We didn't even have stoplights in our town. We were so small. When I moved to Georgia, everyone was talking about how small their towns were. I grew up in Lizella. We have one stoplight. I grew up in Jackson, Louisiana. We had none. We had one of the 70s, and it spooked the horses, so they got it out of there. I go down to South Georgia. People take pride in the number of stoplights they have. We're so small, we've only got a flashing yellow light. Looking at you, Unadilla. Unadilla has more lights than that. Well, we have relatives there. Nonetheless, so the Los Angeles Times goes to Noonan. They were not obsessed like the Hollywood elite who watch read the Los Angeles Times. The Trump supporters, they weren't. They had the audacity to interview a guy who didn't even vote for Donald Trump in 2016, but doesn't think impeachment's a big deal. Now, I hold on to this because, there is one constant in the universe. And I say this as having been one. The smuggest people on planet Earth. In fact, I dare say the most annoying people on planet Earth, and again, I say this as having been one, are law students. And God bless them, law students. The most dangerous person on earth is a first-year law student because they are convinced that they know everything about the law and wantonly threaten to sue people. When I was in law, I went to Mercer Law School. The Walter F. George School of Law of Mercer University. They're too ashamed to say that now at Mercer. They don't want to say the name of their law school anymore because they've gone woke. But I went to Walter F. George School of Law at Mercer University, and there was actually a police officer in town who ran DUI stops on Friday and Saturday nights very often, and he would keep a copy of the OCGA in his police car. That would be the official code of Georgia annotated. That is the book that contains all the criminal statutes. He would keep that, Title 18, I think, or 16 anyway. He would keep it in his car at all times because inevitably he would pull over a drunk Mercer law student who would get into an argument with him about the law and how he was handling it, and he would open up the book and show them that he had a copy of the OCGA and knew what he was talking about. I had this happen. I was the SBA president, or the Student Bar Association president, when I was in my third year in law school, and I know of at least two students who encountered this police officer and got into trouble. And the police officer had his copy of the OCGA. But the smuggest people on planet Earth tend to be law students, particularly first-year law students. They're just terrible. And sure enough, the LA Times goes to Noonan and they find a smug law student who goes to the Walter F. George School of Law, my alma mater. That phone call, if you don't investigate Joe Biden and his son, America will withhold dollars. That's pretty impeachable to me. Now, wait a second here. Wait a second. I'm going to leave the law student's name out. You know, I'm on in Macon. I don't want to give this kid hell. He's 23-year-old know-it-all. That phone call, if you don't investigate Joe Biden and his son, America will withhold dollars. That's not in the phone call. I mean, the dude who doesn't care about it, who works at the Redneck Gourmet, actually read the transcript. This kid, I guess he read it from a news source. So if you don't investigate Joe Biden and his son, America will withhold dollars. That phone call, that's pretty impeachable to me, says a law student at Mercer University in Macon, who was back in Noonan visiting his parents for the holidays as he sipped black coffee at the Leaf and Bean coffee shop. I've been there. If you don't impeach, you set a precedent for later presidents to keep on doing this and abuse their power. Still, he worried the timing was poor. Impeachment, he believed, would only bolster support for Trump in 2020. He didn't identify with any party. They never do. He sighed as he looked out at locals crisscrossing the town, festooned with red bows and green garlands. If you were to sit here, if you were to sit here and ask 8 out of the 10 Trump supporters what's going on in D.C. today, they wouldn't have any idea. He, this law student, tries to keep up with the news on C-SPAN, Apple News, and newspapers such as the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. But he's worried that too many Americans were getting their information from biased news sources like the Washington Post and Apple News and newspapers. I made that last part up. I'm not saying Noonan is undereducated. Lord. But that's what I'm saying. It's like when people say, I'm not a racist, but, or I'm not saying he is racist, but I'm not saying people in Noonan are stupid and uneducated hicks, but a lot of people just jump on the coattails of what other people are saying. They don't care to dig deeper and form their own opinions. He then helpfully pointed out his parents both had college degrees. It's not really a lack of education. It's a lack of knowing what's going on in politics, he said. That's right. The 23-year-old law student knows better than who's the next person they interviewed? Oh, a cardiovascular stenographer who's 59, but he's from Alabama, so you can't believe him. This is the Los Angeles Times writing La Resistance fan fiction out of Noonan, Georgia. They just helpfully show up in a city they call a small town that is connected to the, I bet you, the LA Times. Hang on. We're going to do this together because I have no idea. Let's see. Yes. Yep. Sure enough, the LA Times, they did cover the whole Klan showing up at Noonan. It's so predictable. It really actually is predictable. Oh, well, we can move on, can't we? The LA Times covering small town America, going to the Redneck Gourmet in Noonan, Georgia, finding the one erudite, smart 23-year-old law student at Mercer University who doesn't want you to think that people in Noonan are uneducated, but his parents have college degrees. Oh, laugh, people. Just laugh. Okay, speaking of laughing, we really do need to get into the Democratic debate because they had it last night. So here's what I'm going to do. I want to play for you the montage. I want to play for you the montage of Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren, because it is, I think, a interesting exchange between the two, and it is really abundantly obvious that the Democrats on stage with him genuinely do not like Pete Buttigieg. They genuinely dislike the guy, and there is an ongoing ruckus within the Democratic Party that they don't like the guy, and it conveys a problematic sense of what is going on, I guess we can say. I want to play for you the exchange here with Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren. And essentially, just what you need to know is that Buttigieg he did to Elizabeth Warren what Tulsi Gabbard did to Kamala Harris. Just even the commentators afterwards, we'll get to the Morning Joe, but I want you to hear this in context, and then we're going to get into the rest of it.
I pledged never to be in the company of a progressive Democratic donor. I couldn't be up here. Senator, your net worth is 100 times mine. Now, supposing that you went home feeling the holiday spirit, I know this isn't likely, but stay with me, and decided to go on to PeteForAmerica.com and give the maximum allowable by law, $2,800. Would that pollute my campaign because it came from a wealthy person? No, I would be glad to have that support. We need the support from everybody who is committed to helping us defeat Donald Trump.
So yeah, it didn't go well. But wait, when the crowd dies down, it gets even worse.
We would like to bring in everyone, but obviously, Senator Warren, I'd like to give you a chance to respond.
I do not sell access to my time. I don't do call time with millionaires and billionaires.
Sorry, as of when, Senator?
I don't meet behind closed doors with big dollar donors. And look, I've taken one that ought to be an easy step for everyone here. I've said to anyone who wants to donate to me, if you want to donate to me, that's fine. But don't come around later expecting to be named ambassador.
Well, it kind of got out of control from there. They didn't do well. Let's go to Morning Joe, where they really liked it.
The mayor just recently had a fundraiser that was held in a wine cave full of crystals and served $900 a bottle wine. Think about who comes to that. He had promised that every fundraiser he would do would be open door, but this one was closed door. We made the decision many years ago that rich people in smoke-filled rooms would not pick the next president of the United States. Billionaires in wine caves should not pick the next president of the United States.
This is the problem with issuing purity tests you cannot yourself pass.
Ouch.
If I pledged never to be in the company of a progressive Democratic donor, I couldn't be up here. Senator, your net worth is 100 times mine.
I do not sell access to my time. I don't do call time with millionaires and billionaires.
Sorry, as of when, Senator? Senator, your presidential campaign right now, as we speak, is funded in part by money you transferred, having raised it at those exact same big-ticket fundraisers you now denounce. Did it corrupt you, Senator? Of course not.
Oh, yeah. Well, how did that go over? Listen to the talking heads.
Jonathan Lemire. It's hard to find many people outside the Warren campaign who didn't believe Mayor Pete got the best of that exchange. And the line really between those two of the night was don't hold other people to purity tests that you yourself cannot live by, because Mayor Pete's exactly right. She transferred a ton of big money from her Senate campaign over to a presidential campaign. And, I mean, she's fueling her presidential run on that. And he asked, I think, the important question. Did that money compromise your values? And I don't think she had a good response.
Now, for those of you who you haven't seen the pictures of this place, we'll get into the whole wine cave dynamic here. But so Buttigieg did a fundraiser. Their press were allowed in to photograph and keep notes. But Buttigieg does this, and he's in this cave. It's got this barrel vaulted ceiling. It looks like you're on the inside of a barrel and made of brick. And it's got this Sikorsky crystal chandelier that looks like a tree hanging from the ceiling. It's got this huge trunk, like a big oak tree or something, and then Sikorsky crystal leaves and lights. It was really impressive because the dude's a billionaire. He who owns the cave. He also, I guess it's the Screaming Eagle wine or some such. His wine bottles sell for $800 or $900 a bottle. I mean, wine is of the devil. I hate grapes. I genuinely grapes disgust me. I was honest to goodness. I was in law school before I would take full communion. I would always get the bread, but the rest of it, no, because grapes just disgust me. And I finally had a friend of mine who's a pastor say, you kind of have to do that. When we have communion at church, I spend the entire church service getting sweaty palms, just loathing the fact that I'm going to have to do it because I hate grapes that much. But I do it only in church. And then I go home and try not to gag from the grapes. But nonetheless, apparently some of you people like wine, and Pete Buttigieg and the Democrats, they love it, and they're having fundraisers in wine caves. That's a new one for the 2020 campaign.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick Erickson.
it's me. I'm back. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You can get me on Twitter at EW Erickson. You can get me on Instagram at EW Erickson. You can get me on Facebook at EW Erickson. I am ubiquitous at EW Erickson across the internet. And in fact, you can also get recipes from me even next week while I am on vacation and away from you people, a term I use endearingly. I will send you a recipe. I don't know what it's going to be. You'll be as surprised as me. I will find something. I may send the pound cake recipe. Who knows? It is Christmas. I should send you like fattening good stuff. The phone number. Yeah, except Snapchat, Philip tells me. Yes. No, I am not on Snapchat. I am a 40-year-old man. There is no 40-year-old man on the planet. There's no 20-year-old man on the planet who needs to be on Snapchat. None of you need to be on Snapchat. If you come to my house, you can't even get on Snapchat. We have it blocked over our router. You have to use a cell service. There is no way. Snapchat is terrible. Stay away from it. Now, random aside. If you want the recipes, text recipe to 33777. The phone number is 33777. The word to text is recipe, and I'll send you a recipe next week while I'm on vacation because I love y'all. I'll send you something. We still have plenty more of the show to go. And, I got to do something that I do every year, and I realized I haven't done it. Do you know why Christmas is December 25th? I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's December 25th because those early Christians, they wanted to co-opt the Roman holidays. Actually, that may not be true. We'll get there. But first, a little more on the wine cave and the Democratic debate. Yes, we actually do need to spend a little more time on the Democratic debate. I made poor Philip. Philip is one of my minion, and he had to cut up all the audio this morning. And I told him, when you cut up the audio of these Democratic debates and these Democratic politicians, you may wind up really hating people. You may wind up hating life itself, having to listen to all this drivel that I'm going to make y'all listen to. But we will get there, all of it, when we come back. But first, I do just want to remind you, as time is running out this year, to make charitable donations where you get a tax deduction. There are a lot of food banks in the state of Georgia and soup kitchens that could use your charitable deductions to feed the homeless and people in the community who are in need. And if you're inclined to make charitable deductions, think about your local community and those local food banks and homeless shelters and soup kitchens that could use your dollars in your community. Seek the welfare of your city when you're in exile. There you will find your welfare people. Take the Jeremiah 29 principle on this charitable giving at the end of the year. We'll be back with more on the Democratic debate. It is Erick Erickson here. Welcome. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of this here program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Richard from Warner Robins actually direct messages me on Twitter and says, why are you giving out your phone number if I can't call? At least he's listening. Well, Richard and Warner Robins. And when I come back from Christmas vacation, my call screener will also be back, and then you can call in, except you, Richard. You're not allowed to call in now. Okay, we got to play. I've been waiting to play this clip. Let's play the clip.
If anyone lost the debate tonight, it would have been Mayor Pete, simply because he was the brunt of the attacks. I mean, Elizabeth Warren really went after him on how he has financed his campaign. There was a famous recent photo of a fancy wine cave in Napa where he had, and so wine caves became like Amy Klobuchar told us. I've never been to a wine cave, Brian, but people. The judge has, and that was an issue, and there was an edge to the way or some points on the question of his experience. All the rest of us offensive more than the others. I think it was not a great night for him.
He was on the defensive. Speaking of Amy Klobuchar, yeah, she threw some real.
Dad was a newspaperman, and I am the one that asked every attorney general candidate we've had under Donald Trump, both of whom I opposed, Attorney General Holder put in place when it came to protecting our journalists. They would not commit that they would experience that I will bring to the White House with protecting the First Amendment is
who are closest to his age. Just random aside here, and this will. I'm as I have grown in politics. When I started writing at Red State, helped found the site. I wasn't one of the initial. I was at CNN for 3 years, was at Fox for 5 years, have a nationally syndicated newspaper column. Next month, I'll be on HBO. I actually start a new pilot for a new TV series, got commissioned the other day, as a matter of fact. Well, I shouldn't say. I have found the more I do and the more I engage, the people who they aren't my friends, but the people who know me have encountered me the longest where I live. And I very much want to be. So last week, at the beginning of this week, WMAC, which is 940 WMAC in Macon, is the talk station in Middle Georgia. It covers all of Middle Georgia, picked up the show. It's where sense in the back of my head that, if I say anything, the people who have encountered me the most will be the most hostile or critical. It's very much like, not to bring Jesus into it, but, a prophet's not welcome in his hometown. The people who are most familiar with you are most contemptuous of you more often than not. And it's interesting with Buttigieg that the gay community and millennials, he is a gay millennial, and the gay community and millennials happen to be the most savagely critical of Pete Buttigieg. And the reason is because, in very much the same way of you relate to the person because of their identity, and they don't match that identity that they claim to have. Therefore, there must be something to disagree with on the president or something else. They react much more hostilely than those of anywhere else because they're familiar with me and they think I should sound just like them. Y'all, if y'all hadn't figured out yet, I march to the beat of my own drummer. But there is a level of familiarity there. So you've got these Democratic presidential candidates who are familiar with Buttigieg, and you've got millennial and gay voters who are familiar with Buttigieg and identify with him in their identity, and he doesn't behave like them. Therefore, they are the most critical and hostile of him. These people really don't like Buttigieg. They consider him an upstart, and part of it with these presidential candidates is they resent like hell that Mayor Pete Buttigieg is a mayor of South Bend, Indiana, a mayor running for president of the United States, singularly unaccomplished in politics. And he can have all the fawning profiles of his time in the military, his time learning Norwegian just to be able to read a novel. There's actually a story out there. Buttigieg learned Norwegian just so he could read a novel in its original language. He's so dreamy. There is a level of pretension there, too, in the narrative. I'm sure he's a perfectly nice guy. I don't like the way he throws around religion and Christianity, but he is Episcopalian. He likes to throw it in Christians' faces, and he gets it all wrong. There are things about him I don't like, but I'm sure he's a perfectly nice guy. A little bit of a know-it-all. As the president said yesterday, Alfred E. Newman, if you know Mad Magazine. But these people really don't like him. They really don't like him. They believe he's an upstart, and on it goes. Nonetheless, it's a fascinating dynamic watching the contempt that these people have. Now, how did the Democratic debate go overall? Well, here's Brian Williams.
And we are safely able to report it is the last Democratic debate of 2019. It was, to be candid, more like a student council debate for well over the first hour. And after an earnest discussion about politics and the economy, suddenly the gloves came off during some spirited and at times biting exchanges between different pairs of candidates. Things got downright sharp between Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren, for example, in a way we will go into in a bit.
Yeah, I'll say it got sharp. They really came after him. Well, there was also the interesting Elizabeth Warren-Tom Steyer exchange on the economy.
Senator Warren, I have a question for you. Every candidate on the stage has proposed tax increases on the wealthy, but you have especially ambitious plans that, apart from health care, would hike taxes an additional $8 trillion over the decade, the biggest tax increase since World War II. How do you answer top economists who say taxes of this magnitude would stifle growth and investment?
Oh, they're just wrong.
It's just wrong. All major economists on both sides of the aisle, by the way, you should understand this, that it's not just Republicans. It is on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats alike. The economists from both parties agree that Elizabeth Warren's plan would wreck the economy. Now, here's Tom Steyer.
Let me say that I agree with Senator Warren in much of what she says. I've been for a wealth tax for over a year. I'm in favor of undoing all the tax breaks for rich people and big corporations that this administration has put through. And in addition, I've talked about equilibrating the taxes on passive investment income, which would allow us to cut taxes for 95% of Americans by 10%. But there's something else going on here that I think is really important, and that's this. We know Mr. Trump's going to run on the economy. I built a business over 30 years from scratch. We're going to have to take him on the economy in terms of growth as well as economic justice.
Economic justice.
The transgender community has been marginalized in every way possible.
Pandering.
And one thing that the President of the United States can do is lift up attention, lift up their voices, lift up their lives. Here's a promise I make. I will go to the Rose Garden once every year to read the names of transgender women, of people of color who have been killed in the past year. I will make sure that we read their names so that as a nation,
come on, people,
we are forced to address the particular vulnerability on homelessness. I will change the rules now that put people in prison based on their birth sex identification rather than their current identification. I will do everything I can to make sure that we are in America that leaves no one behind.
Why? Instead of going to the Rose Garden and listing the names of people in the transgender community who have been killed or died, why not work to prevent it? These people are insufferable. By the way, have y'all heard about J.K. Rowling? You know, Harry Harry Potter come to die. Harry Potter, the author of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, tweeted out that she has the audacity to tweet out she stands with Maya. Maya is a lady in London who was fired for saying that biologically there are sexes and they cannot be changed. Men cannot change their sex to women and women cannot change their sex to men, and that scientifically it matters and logically it matters. She was fired, and in the UK, a court says that her firing was justified because of the harm she's doing to the transgender community by stating scientific fact. Scientific fact gets you fired in Great Britain now, justifiably so. And J.K. Rowling tweeted that this is ridiculous. She stands with Maya, that men are men and women are women. Sexes can't be changed. The science says so. And the transgender mob is out to get her. They actually genuinely have produced a left-wing sites out there now saying that anyone who agrees with J.K. Rowling is a Nazi. The Vox kids, Vox.com, subsidized by General Electric, no less. Actually, a writer put out a tweet saying that the people who disagree with or agree with J.K. Rowling are Nazis. They themselves wrote an article. Has J.K. Rowling just ruined Harry Potter for you by coming out as transphobic? She's not phobic about anything. She's pro-science. The science says men cannot become women and women cannot become men. You may not like that, but that's what the science says. You can't biologically change your sex. You may chop things off or add things to yourself, but you're not changing your biological sex. 50 years from now, you've had all the hormone therapy and plastic surgery and everything else. If someone samples your DNA, they're going to say, guess what? This person's a boy, even if you've done all the work to make yourself look like a girl. And by the way, we have spent the last several years now with the transgender community telling us sex and gender are different things. This woman who got fired said that sex is immutable, unchangeable. Men can't become women and women can't become men based on sex. Well, gender and sex are different things. Even she acknowledged it, that one may have a different gender, but their sex cannot be changed. And now suddenly she's fired and the transgender community is out to get J.K. Rowling for it's just science, people. You know, all of the time Christians in this country get ridiculed as being anti-science. Oh, you believe a guy came back to life. You're so anti-science. You believe a woman could give birth to a child and she hadn't had sex. You're so anti-science. Really? You believe a boy can become a girl and a girl can become a boy? And you can't tell me when life begins? Well, science has answers to those things. Don't tell me I'm anti-science. The left-wing mob is insane. Now, if you think that it's kind of nuts that people are going after J.K. Rowling for saying the science says men can't become women, well, you're talking about people who believe that men can become women. So, yeah, it is kind of nuts, actually.
Want to be on the show? Call Erick now at 877-97-ERIC. That's 877.
I want to deal very briefly with a story close to home. Jeff Duncan's Chief of Staff, Chip Lake, has left the building. Chip Lake, I know very much like. One of the few people to ever get the better of me in a political campaign, consulting. In fact, the very first congressional race I ever did, his candidate won, mine lost. He's a good guy, really is. And he and Jeff Duncan have parted ways. There is a report in the AJC that one of the issues was that Jeff Duncan is getting advice from a life coach on his decisions. I need to mention the story to let you know it's there, but I got to tell you, I like and deeply respect both gentlemen, and I don't know all the details of the story, and I'm not going to wing it on this one because I like both of them very much. And Duncan, whether he's consulting from a life coach or not, he has been a very good lieutenant governor, and he's been willing to pick fights with his own side on school choice, and that is commendable. And we should be glad he is there as an outsider in the Senate. He's a good dude, and so is Chip. I will say this: Chip Lake has phenomenal political instincts, and I don't know the people who surround the lieutenant governor really at this point in his office with Chip not there. But Chip has just amazing political instincts, is very politically savvy, and the lieutenant governor has lost a great asset in losing Chip. So now I will check the box off and say I've talked about that story. Also, Kelly Loeffler is still not the senator. She has, however, now gotten committee assignments. She will be on the Ag Committee, and she will be on Veterans Affairs. She'll be replacing Johnny Isakson on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and that's good. And I gotta tell you, she has come out today, or yesterday actually, and said she supports RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. She supports religious liberty for Christians, and that's great to hear, but I gotta tell you that she can't do anything about that in the Senate, so it's a very safe position for her to take, saying I support religious liberty, but never have to vote on the issue again. But she's making the rounds, calling conservatives, trying to lock down conservative support. She's being very smart in how she's doing it. She's reaching out to the grassroots, not just the grass tops. She's trying to give people her cell phone number and build bridges to stop any sort of challenge to her as she becomes senator. I got to tell you, though, I have this distinct impression that when she gets to the Senate in January and she's sworn in and Nancy Pelosi does finally send over the articles of impeachment, they will eventually send them over there because it becomes politically embarrassing for the Democrats if they don't. There is an impeachment trial and Loeffler votes against impeachment, releases a strong denunciation of impeachment, and she has, by the way, this week she has. The Republicans are going to embrace her and treat her as their own. I mean, it's pretty easy these days. So Jay Powell is the now deceased chairman of the Rules Committee. He's from the Albany area, Albany. He died suddenly at a retreat. I believe he had a heart attack. There is a special election down in South Georgia for his race. And you've already got several people who are running. 2 Republicans and a Democrat have already come out, and both Republicans are running trying to be as Trumpy as possible. Fealty to Donald Trump, love of Donald Trump. The moment one of these candidates, both of them men, say that they would be willing to birth Donald Trump's love child, you know whichever one says that first is going to be the one who wins. That's what you do in the Republican Party these days in certain parts of the country, particularly here in Georgia. Now, that's not to ridicule anyone, and I'm sorry if that offends you, but, you know, I mean, that is the truth. The most loyal supporter of the president is the one who gets Republican votes these days in Georgia. It doesn't matter if you got the best ideas. It doesn't matter if you've done the most of the conservative movement. It doesn't matter if you've got the proven track record of being a conservative. The one who says the most outlandish things in support of the president tend to get the nomination these days. That's just the world we live in. We're in a cult of personality. If Kelly Loeffler comes out and beats the drum and says how much she loves Donald Trump and Donald Trump's family, and Donald Trump says something glowing about her, tweets something nice about Kelly Loeffler, done, sold. She will be the nominee. No one will run against her. That's the only thing that has to happen in Georgia is either the president says something nice about Kelly Loeffler or she says just glowing, fawning things about Donald Trump and outrageous things about the Democrats. And she'll be just fine. And everybody knows that's the truth. And here's the problem, honestly, this is the real problem here, is we've reached an age in politics where the emotional content of phrases speaks more than people's actual character and record.
30.
The Trumpier you are in your statements, even if you don't believe it, the better off you are in politics these days. And same on the progressive side. The more you say outrageous, crazy things about the president, the better you're going to do on the left. Never mind your record. You may vote just like what president, you may vote 100% for what Donald Trump wants, but if you blast him on the left, you're A-OK. Proof of that is in Jeff Van Drew switching to the Republicans. We'll get into that. And why Christmas is December 25th.
The average time of resumes
and welcome. It is the third hour of the Erick Erickson Show here across the state of Georgia. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You can get me on social media at EW Erickson, everywhere except Snapchat. And you can also email me if you ever want to email me, Erick. And just remember, it's ERICK. Best of both worlds. I got the C and the K. ERICK at theresurgent.com. You can go to theresurgent.com every day. Now, every year I do this, and I try to do it the first day back from Thanksgiving break, and I didn't this year. We've had so much going on, but I want to pause, and yet you will have to forgive me. Some of you may gripe. I talk faith, I talk culture, I talk religion, all the stuff you're not supposed to talk about, we talk about it here. And one of those things that I try to do every year is why Christmas is on December 25th. It's coming up. It's on Wednesday. This rush from Thanksgiving to Christmas has been crazy. My neighbors down the street from me, they started putting their Christmas decorations up before Thanksgiving. And, the crazy thing about it is they're going to spend the afternoon of Christmas yanking it all down. I'm like, leave it up. There are 12 days of Christmas, and Christmas Day is the beginning day of Christmas, not the end. Christmas ends January 5th. Enjoy your Christmas decorations until then. Now, we got people who live down the road from us. If you've ever driven down Bass Road in Macon, you will see there are people, they'll leave their lights up until February. My wife would divorce me if I did that. I would love to, but no. It ended badly. But why is Christmas December 25th? Most of us probably learned what I learned growing up. I went to a school in Dubai, and it was an American school, but in Dubai, and Christianity, as it grew in the Roman Empire, began co-opting pagan holidays and making them Christian. And the Romans, they had a huge festival, Saturnalia, at the winter solstice. Tomorrow is the winter solstice, and the great wobble wobbles a little more back in the other direction. And I'm so glad. From about the middle of November till the middle of January, it is so dark outside by 6 p.m. And the winter solstice happens tomorrow, the 21st, and the world tilts as far to the sun, far away from the sun on the northern hemisphere as it does, and it begins to wobble back towards the sun, and I'm glad. I'm ready for the sun to shine longer. But the Romans at the winter solstice had the festival of Saturnalia. And then Emperor Aurelian began to celebrate Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. And Aurelian set the date for the unconquered sun celebration to be December 25th. And so a lot of historians have said Christians could claim Christ was the unconquered son and draw people into their religion, and that's why they put Christmas on December 25th. And the theory really didn't develop until the 12th century that was the case, and it took off after the 18th century. Something happened in the 18th and 19th century. That is a bunch of German, and I'm going to use air quotes here, Christians. The greatest atheists in Christianity have all come from Germany. They're Christians who don't believe Christianity. And they did their best to try to find a historic Jesus. And you know what happens when you try to find a historic Jesus? You find someone who looks and thinks exactly like yourself. Albert Schweitzer, one of the most famous people to ever walk the planet. In the early 20th century, he won the Nobel Prize. He was a doctor. He was a theologian. I mean, he was everything. Albert Schweitzer was the man. Albert Schweitzer was so famous that even into the 1980s, comedies would make jokes. Who do you think I am, Albert Schweitzer? No, I had never heard of Albert Schweitzer until I went to seminary, but I seem to remember the jokes from when I was a kid. People talking about this Albert Schweitzer guy. I didn't know who he was. Well, that's who he was. Super famous. And he wrote a book on finding the historic Jesus, and he analyzed all the people who had tried to find the historic Jesus and determined that every single one of them had found someone who thought and believed exactly like the person trying to find the historic Jesus. And then do you know what Albert Schweitzer did? He wrote about Jesus, and he sounded exactly like Albert Schweitzer. It was very funny. In any event, those are the German theologians. Now, the early church, you need to understand this, never actually celebrated Christ's birthday. They weren't interested in it. They weren't interested in Christ's birthday because that's what the pagans did. The pagans celebrated birthdays. The early Christian church was far more interested in the more relevant time. That would be the death and resurrection of Christ. When did that happen? Now, if you actually trace it back, how did they come up with the birth? You actually start to realize that they had reasons outside of co-opting paganism to set Jesus' birthday at December 25th. In fact, there are early archaeological signs that we can explore that put December 25th as a Christian celebration before Sol Invictus. And there are actually a lot of historians who now look at Aurelian embracing the festival of Sol Invictus, the Feast of the Unconquered Sun, as a Roman pagan way to pull Christians back into Roman paganism. That the response from Aurelian for the Feast of the Unconquered Sun had more to do with the rise of Christianity in his empire, not that Christians were co-opting that holiday, but he was trying to co-opt Jesus' birthday. So to understand why the church celebrates Jesus' birth on December 25th, you got to understand that the early church recognized that Jesus' death and resurrection were of gravest importance. Christians to this day, the high holy days of Christianity are around Easter. Now, Andrew McGowan is with the Biblical Archaeological Society, and he wrote at the Biblical Archaeological Society this: around 200 AD, Tertullian of Carthage, one of the most famous of the early church theologians, reported the calculation that the 14th of Nisan in the year Jesus died was the equivalent to March 25th in the Roman calendar. Now, that matters because the 14th of Nisan, according to the gospel, is when Jesus was crucified. Now, Christians and Jews at the time held as fact that a prophet died on the same calendar date as their conception. And what this meant as a practical matter is that if Jesus died on March 25th, then he would have been conceived on March 25th as well. Now go 9 months from March 25th, and where do you land? December 25th. Now, concurrent to Tertullian trying to find this, there was another theory. The Christian divisions within the Roman Empire were East and West, and it had a lot to do with the Latin-speaking West and the Greek-speaking East. In fact, many of the debates we still have today are over this division between Latin and Greek. Are we a democracy? Are we a republic? Things like that. You had these huge fights in the early church too, and it was over Latin and Greek concepts of using different words, and the concepts were mostly the same. So you had Roman person and Greek Persephone, and they largely became the same word when we talk about three persons in the Trinity. It was to embrace this common similarity in the words between Greek and Latin, because the Greek's Persephone was a person in a play. In a Greek play, one person who could put on a variety of masks to be multiple characters, and the Latin had the word person, and it basically was the same. It could equate, and they had to settle on that word because Greek and Latin were getting different terminologies and different words. Well, you had at the same time this exploration for when Christ died in the East and the West. And Tertullian in the East said it as March 25th. Well, concurrent to this in the West, or in the East rather, they were trying to figure all this out. And Zacharias, John the Baptist's father, he was in the priestly division of Abijah. Now, knowing the division of the priests in the temple in Jerusalem when it fell in AD 70, and assuming an unbroken chain, early church historians in the East worked their way backward and concluded Zacharias had been in the temple towards the end of October. And the Bible tells us that after Zacharias left the temple, his wife conceived John, and Luke 1 notes that 6 months later, Mary conceived Jesus. So that would put Mary conceiving Jesus around March 25th. When Tertullian was saying that Jesus would have died on March 25th. So the two separate calculations confirmed each other, one in the East and one in the West. They came together and said, March 25th must have actually been the date of the crucifixion. And if that was the case, both of them on the East and the West agreed that a prophet was born on the same date he died. So if Jesus died on March 25th, he would have been conceived on March 25th. You count 9 months forward, you land on December 25th. Now, the earliest known records of celebrating Jesus' birthday come in about 8200. That's 1,000 years before the documented suggestion that Christians set his birthday to correspond with pagan holidays. And remember, early Christians didn't celebrate Jesus' birth. They only wanted to know when he died because of the crucifixion and resurrection. It was in the southern part of the Roman Empire, along the Mediterranean and North Africa, where birthdays were more commonly celebrated by early Christians. And by 200 AD, there's archaeological evidence and in the writings that people were beginning to, based on the writings of Tertullian and the writings of the Eastern Church leaders, setting Jesus' birthday December 25th and beginning to celebrate it. Now, by 300, Christians were celebrating Christmas on December 25th. Because it fell 9 months after the date of his crucifixion, and by 400, AD 400, it had become a regular church celebration. And by AD 400, the Christian church was celebrating Jesus' birth. Now, a lot of scholars reject the idea that Zacharias was in the temple in October of the year Gabriel appeared to him. And a lot of modern scholarship suggests Jesus was probably born in the spring, given the shepherds tending the sheep in the field. And so it's probably likely that the church actually got it wrong, that it wasn't December 25th, that Jesus wasn't actually born on December 25th. But what's important is they thought they were right at the time. And so they set the date of Christmas for reasons entirely unrelated to Saturnalia or Sol Invictus. They set it because they believed that a prophet, and they accepted Jesus as not just Lord and Savior, but also prophet, king, high priest, that he would have died on the date he was conceived, which Tertullian, who was respected throughout the Roman Empire, had decided that was March 25th. And that lined up with their calculations for when John the Baptist's father would have been in the temple, and then Mary conceiving 6 months later and all that. It would have all lined up perfectly to March 25th. So 9 months later, we're at December 25th. That makes some sense. But doesn't matter. I give you all of that first for you to understand that there actually is plenty of evidence out there that it wasn't just the Christians co-opting holidays. In fact, there's plenty of evidence that by the time Aurelian was emperor, Christians were already celebrating December 25th and Jesus' birthday in parts of the empire. There's actually well-documented archaeological historic evidence of that, and that Aurelian, troubled by the growth of Christianity in the Roman Empire, embraced Sol Invictus, the unconquered son, and put him and said, hey, here's your unconquered son. He's a Roman god. He's not this Jesus guy. In fact, Aurelian began one of the mass persecution and extermination efforts of Christians within the Roman Empire. Now, there's actually legitimate evidence that the Christians did this all on their own. They weren't co-opting, as so many people like to say, oh, you silly people, you just celebrate Easter and Christmas because of all this. There are real legit reasons for why they did it. But as we get to Christmas, here's what you need to understand. It doesn't matter. What matters is not when his birthday is, but that he is. There are a lot of atheists, they want to write Jesus' existence out of history. I mean, based on the same rules, there are a lot of other people you'd have to write out of history. I mean, there are an extraordinary number, including Socrates. Nobody disputes Socrates lived. But based on the same standards you set for writing Jesus out of history to say he wasn't a real person, you got to do the same with Socrates, who never wrote himself. This genius philosopher never wrote. But here's the thing. I'm an evangelical Christian, and I believe he really exists. I believe he is real. I believe he's going to return to judge the quick and the dead, all that. You can call it hoo-ha if you want. I believe it is true. And I got to tell you about the only thing fraudulent in the Christmas season to me is the idea of Silent Night. It was not a silent night. A woman was giving birth. I assure you, she was not a Scientologist where they believe you actually got to be completely quiet when you push a child into the world. No. I assure you that it was not a silent night. Between a newborn baby, the heavenly hosts singing glory to God in the highest, the animals in the manger, there was nothing silent about the first Christmas. Doesn't matter when it actually was, though. What matters is it actually took place, and I firmly believe it took place.
Well connected and well respected. It's Erick Erickson, live every
It is Erick Erickson here across the state of Georgia. I will be sending recipes, even though I'm going to take a few days off. I'm going to be back. Some of you may know, my Christmas show, I always feel apologetic for it, and yet it's always like the one show every year that people would prefer I do than anything else. But I know it makes some people a little squeamish who own radio stations. It is a very explicitly pro-Christmas, pro-Jesus radio show. I will do it on Tuesday where I'm not making... So back in the day when I would fill in for Rush, I would typically fill in for him on Christmas Eve and the day after Christmas, largely because there was no way Mark Stein was going to come in on Christmas Eve and work, so they would make me do it. So I would fill in Christmas Eve and the day after Christmas, and I just thought, if ever I have a radio show, I'm going to do the Christmas stuff myself and not make anybody else do it. And so I will do an explicitly Christmas show on Christmas Eve when you're out and about doing your last-minute shopping next week. Be sure to tune in. Lots of Christmas music, some of the Andrew Peterson stuff, his new Behold the Lord. Our Behold the Lamb of God album is in there, and me talking about life. No politics, no news headlines. And then we run it all over again on Christmas as almost a best of, if you will. But it is very explicitly a Christmas show. Because I believe that, God has blessed me with a job that I don't even consider this a job, y'all. I get up in the mornings and come in here, and then I do it all over again in the evening. I do 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, and a completely different live show, live for you right now, and I love it. It is not a job. It's a blessing. I get to come in here and talk about whatever I want to talk about, and you can't stop me. I could sit here and read a recipe on the radio right now, and they may cancel the show on your local station where you're listening to it, but I could do it until all the stations can. I'm not going to. Don't worry about it. Calm down, people. But it's just, I love it. I hear people all the time, how can you talk 5 hours a day? There's so much to talk about. It's just, I have a lot of fun doing it, and I'm glad people listen and enjoy it and find it enjoyable so that I can keep doing it and occasionally make people mad. And I may be about to make some people mad because Christianity today is, well, it's got an editorial up. And the editorial calls for the impeachment of Donald Trump. And I disagree, but I don't disagree, but I disagree, and we should delve into it. Before we do, though, I want to spend a moment on some of the 12 terrible moments of 2019 in the media, because this in and of itself, the media should be shamed by a lot of this stuff, and they're not. And let me just run through some of this. Grabian has done this. It's too long to get into right now, but this is worth noting. Some of these things, you probably have forgotten that some of these happened in 2019. All of you people who are fawning over how much you trust the media to give you accurate news.
We're talking about racism. It's not his dinner. We are an impeachment. There's something very ugly at the heart of Trump.
Outrage over this now viral video showing high school teenagers harassing a Native American elder.
The Native American man who was beating the drum, Nathan Phillips, and those kids in the Make America Great Again hats that were kind of smirking at him and kind of looking down their noses at him.
As one smirking high school student blocks the elder's path.
The video appears to show dozens of youths wearing Make America Great Again hats, mocking Native American elder and Vietnam veteran Nathan Phillips.
A veteran, a Native American man, was, had a standoff with students who were, mocking him.
We feel that President Trump is giving license to some of this behavior.
February.
Empire star Jussie Smollett was the victim of a vicious, racist, and homophobic attack.
His attackers hurled racial and homophobic slurs.
Not only homophobia, we're talking about racism. We're talking about hate with steroids.
They are looking for two suspects who were apparently wearing Make America Great Again hats.
The offenders uttered, "This is MAGA country."
This is stomach-turning, mind-boggling information.
This is a horrible story.
Yeah.
Horrendous and unacceptable.
And this is America in 2019.
And on it goes. We'll get into those other stories as well that the media highlighted and got so wrong in 2019, and yet we still all rely on the media to give us our news. There's something to be said there about ourselves, I suppose. We'll be right back. All right, we arrive at the end of the show. So Christianity Today, Mark Galli has written an editorial for Christianity Today and says Trump should be removed from office. Now, the media has seized upon this because, oh my goodness, it's Christianity Today. The problem here, though, is that Christianity Today isn't really representative of the evangelical movement in the country. Galli himself says that, at least as long as I've been editor-in-chief, I've never imagined that we at Christianity Today speak for all evangelicals. We speak for moderate, center-right, and center-left evangelicals. The far right, they don't read us. They don't care what we think. They think we've been co-opted by liberalism, so I understand that we do not represent the entire movement, and anyone who thinks that Christianity Today does, that's just not the case. At least he's more honest about it than the media is in their coverage of Christianity Today's op-ed calling for the Donald Trump to be impeached. In our founding documents, Billy Graham explained that Christianity Today will help evangelical Christians interpret the news in a manner that reflects their faith. The impeachment of Donald Trump is a significant event in the story of our republic. It requires comment. The typical CT approach is to stay above the fray and allow Christians with different political convictions to make their arguments in the public square, to encourage all to pursue justice according to their convictions and treat the political opposition as charitably as possible. We want CT to be a place that welcomes Christians from across the political spectrum and reminds everyone that politics is not the end or purpose of our being. That said, we feel it necessary from time to time to make our own opinions on political matters clear. Let's grant this to the president. The Democrats have had it out for him from day one, and therefore nearly everything they do is under cloud of partisan suspicion. But the facts in this instance are unambiguous. The president of the United States attempted to use his political power to coerce a foreign leader to harass and discredit one of the president's political opponents. That is not only a violation of the Constitution, more importantly, it's profoundly immoral. And on it goes, essentially saying that we have reserved judgment on Mr. Trump for years now. Some have criticized us for our reserve. But when it comes to condemning the behavior of another, patient charity must come first. So we have done our best to give evangelical Trump supporters their due, to try to understand their point of view, to see the prudent nature of so many political decisions they may have regarding Mr. Trump. To use an old cliche, it's time to call a spade, to say that no matter how many hands we win in the political poker game, we're playing with a stacked deck of gross immorality and ethical incompetence. And just when we think it's time to push all our chips to the center of the table, that's when the whole game will come crashing down. It will crash down on the reputation of evangelical religion and on the world's understanding of the gospel, and it will come crashing down on a nation of men and women whose welfare is also our concern. They also use the 10 Commandments. He should be removed, we believe, is not a matter of partisan loyalty, but loyalty to the creator of the 10 Commandments. I do have to point out, if you're going to use the 10 Commandments to say Donald Trump should be impeached, that kind of applies to every president. Kind of does. We're all sinners. We all fall short of the glory of God. I got to tell you, I have been quite critical of the president and have been one of the people who says very strongly character counts. And I tend to think that the president actually, well, I shouldn't even say the president at this point. I do think that there are people within the evangelical movement who harm themselves with how they apologize for a lot of the crazy things the president does. There are some things the president does that really it's bad form for him to do, frankly. I mean, take the John Dingell remarks. I don't think he should have done it. I do think the president has a tendency to get others to show the worst in themselves because the president sometimes behaves like a brain biblical donkey. There are others who think they can. But it would have been nice if Christianity Today had come out in 2016 with something like this, as opposed to now. Because in 2016, Donald Trump was a hypothetical. He was a man who had long supported Democrats, abortion causes, pro-choice candidates, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and the like, and then suddenly shifted and was still on the campaign trail in 2016 praising Planned Parenthood as they do good work. And you could say this guy's not going to keep his promises. This guy is of the left. He hobnobs with Democrats. He behaves immorally. He's a routine liar. You could say all those things. You could say he cheated on 3 wives. His current wife, pregnant, he was cheating on her with a porn star. That's true. That's a matter of fact. It's in the record. And you could say, as I did in 2016, how can we trust a man to be faithful to his voters and keep his promises when he couldn't be faithful to his various wives? That's all true. It's all stuff I said in 2016. I was there saying that stuff Christianity Today wasn't. Well, then Donald Trump got elected. You know, I said character counts. I'm not going to vote for him or for Clinton. And 120 million Americans disagreed with me and voted between Hillary and Donald Trump, and he won. Between the two of them, he's far better than she would be. And you know, he became president, and he was no longer hypothetical. He was the president. He is the president. You may be listening right now and hate Donald Trump and say, he's not my president. Yes, he is. And from hypothetical, we have a real president. He has moved the embassy to Jerusalem, gotten out of the Paris Accord, gotten out of the Iranian deal. He has not taken Americans into military excursions that cost our soldiers lives needlessly, unlike the prior 2 administrations. He's done a pretty good job as president. Is he a moral man? No, he is a very immoral person. And I don't know that Donald Trump is a Christian. He has been asked multiple times over multiple years, has he ever felt the need to repent? And he said no. And one of the signs of a Christian is a contrite, repentant heart. That Donald Trump believes he's never had anything to repent, to ask God to forgive him for, suggests maybe he's not a Christian. But I got to tell you, there are a whole lot of people out there, Christians, who behave so transactionally with this president, they give me the impression they'd be perfectly fine if he went to hell as long as they got good judges. There are a lot of Christians out there who, in their relationship with the president, to me, seem more interested in what they get from him than in his eternal salvation. And I got a problem with them, not him, on that point. Is the president an immoral person? Yes. But so are the Democrats. Is the president a sinner? Yes. But so are the Democrats. I find in my interactions with people, many of them hate the president not because of what he's doing, but because of his demeanor. They don't like the things he says. They don't pay attention to the policy. They can't get to the policy because they can't get past his character. But I have to tell you, I'm old enough to know that, oh, hush, Siri. I'm old enough to know and realize now that just because you have good demeanor does not mean you have good character. There is a difference between the soft-spoken person who doesn't say outlandish things on Twitter, but is perfectly happy to shut down Christian schools and support abortion and the alphabet gang's mob-like agenda against those who dissent from their agenda. One may have good demeanor, but it doesn't mean they have good character. You can be silent on Twitter and still be a terrible person. There are a lot of people, and Christianity Today, I think, gets to this, that they don't like the president's demeanor. They don't like the president's character. I don't like his character either. And I said character counted in 2016. I wasn't going to vote for him, and 120 million people disagree with me. So when it comes to 2020, I'm not going to sit on the sidelines. I voted third party in 2016, and that guy's been an embarrassment ever since. I'm not going to vote third party this time. So between the two parties, Democrat or Republican, I don't blame you. If you want to sit home, if you want to hold your nose, say politics is gross, I'm sitting this one out, go for it. I hope you'll show up to vote because David Perdue needs your vote, Kelly Loeffler's going to need your vote, and a host of Republicans will need your vote, who are all very fine, decent people. I don't blame you if you want to sit it out. I'm tempted too, but I'm not. Maybe. I don't know. I feel like I'm held hostage to the political environment these days. But if I'm not going third party and I'm not sitting it out, that leaves me a choice between the Republican and the Democrat. And Elizabeth Warren, forget Elizabeth Warren. Let's go far further left to her to Bernie Sanders, an actual communist, a man who defends bread lines in the Soviet Union as proof people aren't starving and rails against corporations in America providing more than one brand of deodorant, and who wrote rape fantasies when he was in college. Bernie Sanders could delete his Twitter account, his social media account tomorrow, all of his social media, never tweet again, never say a mean word to anyone, never even speak. Does that give him better character than Donald Trump? Bernie Sanders, who would destroy the private sector in this country and wipe out millions of jobs, put people on the unemployment line, and then put them in a bread line, does that make him more moral than Donald Trump? Does that give him better character than Donald Trump? You see, I went with character in 2016, and that guy turned out to not have very good character either. So between the Democrat and the Republican, I'm dealing with immoral candidates. I'm dealing with sinners. I'm dealing with immoral people. Now, here's the thing. I have a lot of my friends who say, we're not voting for pastor in chief. Yeah, but you should vote for someone you can be proud of and point to, your kids can point to and say, that guy's a role model. And the President Trump is not a role model. But neither is Bernie Sanders. Joe Biden, I don't know about that. I believe I speak for many, many people. Now, listen, some of you people will be humping Donald Trump's leg 20 years from now and won't vote for anyone unless that person says Donald Trump was Jesus himself come to earth. You know it and I know it, and that can offend you and make you mad. And you're going to call your local radio station. I can't believe you have this guy. He says he's a conservative and he insulted Donald Trump. Yeah, he's voting for him, but he insulted him. I used to be able to criticize George W. Bush, and conservatives say, yeah, you're on. But oh my gosh, you say anything about Donald Trump now, people are so sensitive. You're so sensitive. Cult of personality. Y'all, stop trying to find saviors in politics. Politicians will always disappoint you. If you can't find anything to criticize Donald Trump for, you are in a cult and need a deculting exercise. Pull yourself out of it. Show up at church on Sunday somewhere and embrace Jesus as your Lord and Savior, not Donald Trump. I'm going to vote for the man. I talked to the man. All you people out there yelling at me right now saying you're criticizing the president. He's called me at home. Has he ever called you at home? I've been to the White House. I've been to the dining room near the Oval Office. We've talked about this. It's not like I'm being two-faced or something and fluffing him up as person. No, I've told him he and I disagree on these things. I wish he wouldn't mean tweet. I wish he would stop doing that. Have you noticed the president's polling has gone up in the last 3 weeks? What has he not done in the last 3 weeks? Tweeted aggressively. Every time the president stops tweeting, his poll numbers go up. I have told a friend of mine who works with him on a daily basis that you should show him the polling trend lines. Here's what happens when you start tweeting. And here's what happens when you stop tweeting. Whoosh. And maybe he would get a clue. But I'm voting for him in 2020. And I read this Christianity Today editorial, and I think, there's a lot I agree with when it comes to the character of the president, what they're saying. And I do think there are a lot of evangelicals who have so gotten into the cult of personality with Donald Trump, they are harming their witness. But I also think the Holy Spirit is in charge. And I also think that you and I are not going to lead people astray if the Holy Spirit is in charge. And the same way I say to people who think that Donald Trump is their savior and they need to find Jesus and stop looking for savior in politics, I say to the people who think that we are going to disrupt our witness and drive people away from the church, God is sovereign and he is in charge. And God's will be done, not mine. What I ultimately think in all of this is that these are unusual. These are weird times. None of us have lived through a political time like this. My parents have not lived through a political time like this. You have not lived through a political time like this. This is new for all of us. You can go back to the 1850s, I suppose, the early 1800s, and find times like this. Maybe at the turn of the 20th century, you can find politically disruptive times like this. Back during the Wilson administration, when he hired Brown Church to go around the country and harass people who were critical of him. Maybe then. But none of us have lived through those times. We have no living memory of those times. And I think we're just all muddling through, and we've got to show each other a whole lot of charity and a whole lot of grace to get through these times, because they are highly unusual. It is a messy, messy time in politics. I do know this, though. Eternity is more important than the here and now in politics. And Scripture says to seek the welfare of the city in which you're in exile and pray for it, and there you will find your welfare. And I really do think that so many of us are wrapped up in Washington, and that's why we're all yelling at each other. In addition to none of us know each other anymore. We spend more time talking to each other digitally than we spend face-to-face, so we yell at each other more and more as we know each other less and less. But gosh, there are a lot of people out there who really think you can't support the president unless you're a racist, homophobic bigot. That's not true. There are a lot of people out there who think if you're not supporting the president, you're in favor of destroying the country. That's not true either. We all need to show each other a whole lot more grace. But the idea ultimately with this Christianity Today editorial that we should use a deeply flawed and ridiculous impeachment process to throw the president out of office, that I do find absurd. The whole idea of we should throw him out of office because the Democrats impeached him. The Democrats have been trying to impeach him since before he got elected. It's ridiculous to throw the president out of office on this impeachment. There were 21 Republicans who are leaving. Not a single one of them ever is beholden to President Trump's base of voters again. Half of them deeply hate the president behind the scenes. Most of them blame the president for driving them from office, and yet not a single one of them voted for this impeachment. And all these people who hate the president and say he should be impeached should be looking at these 21 Republicans, none of whom will ever have to encounter a Trump voter again, asking why didn't these people who hate him side with the Democrats? Maybe that suggests the Democratic impeachment was more deeply flawed than the media would suggest to us. And so the idea of voting for impeachment to remove the president because you don't like his character now, in light of what's coming with the Democrats and in light of this impeachment, I do think that's a little bit silly.
Well connected and well respected.
I think you should get on my recipe list. Text the word recipe to the number 33777. What happens is you'll get a text message back asking for your email address. When you send it, you get automatically subscribed. You don't get spam in this email list. You just get a recipe, 1 or 2 a week. Occasionally I forget to send them, but you don't get spam. The list isn't sold. It's just my list to send you recipes so you can break bread with others, so we can practice what I preach on the radio, that we should actually get to know each other as a community face to face, as opposed to actually just randomly interacting digitally. Now, I want to go back to this media montage, but before I do, Brian Kemp has caused some controversy in South Carolina and Florida. He gave a speech in Savannah and told gangbangers, in his phrase, they need need to go to South Carolina or Florida or somewhere else, not Georgia. He's not going to tolerate him in Georgia. In Orlando, Florida, a TV station in Orlando called him out on this and said that if we don't declare a truce immediately, they will send Florida man to Georgia. We may want a truce with Florida, so Florida man doesn't come. Now, I started playing this montage earlier, and I've left it up and from where I am. The 12 most outrageous, mortifying media moments. Back in January, there was the media botching the Covington Catholic High School story with the Native American at the rally in D.C. In February was the Jussie Smollett, to quote what's his name, Dave Chappelle. Now we get into March.
He is going to be delivering what I think are going to be his indictments, the final indictments.
This is suborning perjury. I think there's no question it's an impeachable offense.
And at that point, we are in high crimes and misdemeanor, and we are in impeachment territory. Right.
The spirit of what Trump did is clearly treasonous.
There's outright treason. I think he's feeling the noose around his neck.
The noose is tightening.
He feels the noose is tightening.
The noose is tightening.
People might go to jail
You're exactly right.
for the rest of their lives.
I think they're all going to jail. Well, I think they're all going to end up together in prison, and maybe that's a good thing.
Oh, my God. He has no idea that he's going down.
The investigation is over, and according to a senior DOJ official, there will be no further indictments. How can they let Trump off the hook?
April?
I don't want to dwell on the president. This is not his dinner, it is ours. And it should stay ours. I still separate my career into the period before February of 2017.
This is the White House Correspondents' Dinner in April.
And that's because February 2017 is when the President of the United States called us the enemies of the people. A few days later, I was driving my then 11-year-old son somewhere, probably soccer practice, when he burst into tears and asked me, is Donald Trump going to put you in prison?
In May,
He's very affectionate. I find oddly affectionate.
we have the media defense of Joe Biden.
He's always touching people's shoulders. I've seen him rub the shoulders of women and men.
Joe Biden calls them expressions of affection.
He is an affectionate, old-school politician.
He's a really nice, generous, funny, connecting guy.
Uncle Joe, as we affectionately call him, he's
Oh,
a very
boy.
affectionate, very likable person. You know, he's just an affectionate guy.
I've known Joe Biden a long time, as have many others, and have always found him a very emotional man who is very, very affectionate.
He's touchy-feely. He's been doing it his entire life in an affectionate way.
I think the next time I see Joe Biden, if he doesn't hug me and give me a kiss and hold my hand, that's not the Joe Biden I knew. He's a nice guy. He's not a predator. And this is ridiculous.
Here's June.
There's a group of anti-fascists
We have
called
the media
Black Bloc,
defending
which do
Antifa.
tend to get violent. Their idea is, look, nonviolence hasn't worked, and we are going to try to stop this.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence.
They've taken a principled stand to stand against white supremacists and white nationalists wherever they may show up.
When you go to cancer treatment, the radiation is tough treatment, but it is meant to remove the cancer.
They wouldn't have been anywhere near there had it not been for the fact that white supremacists, neo-Nazis, were out scaring the living daylights out of most of the people in that town.
And it goes on from there. From June in the defense of Antifa, we have the woke media attack the space landing on the 50th anniversary because there weren't any women. You got Chris Cuomo going the full Fredo in August. The Gaga for Greta Thunberg in September, and on it goes. You guys have a Merry Christmas. I will see you on Tuesday. Chris Burns will be here on Monday.